Okay, welcome back. This is an original Tales for a Story about in-laws assuming they can do whatever they want. This assumption didn't last. Let's begin.
My mother-in-law demanded that my 9-year-old daughter give her $1,600 MacBook to her cousin as a gift. She told her that if she refused, she should no longer call her grandma. Then my husband stood up and said this. His parents' faces went pale. I knew something was wrong the second my daughter walked through the front door. Grace usually comes in like a small hurricane. Shoes kicked off in the general direction of the shoe rack. Backpack dropped wherever gravity feels like placing it. A running commentary about her day, delivered at high speed, with the energy of someone who has never once paid a mortgage. That night, Grace stepped inside like she was entering a museum. Quiet. Careful. Her shoulders were up around her ears like she was trying to disappear into her hoodie. Michael followed behind her, carrying her overnight bag. My husband's face was neutral in that way he does when he thinks neutral means no one can read me, even though I have been reading him for years like a menu. They were fine, he said before I could ask. Mom and Dad. Grace had a good time. Grace didn't say anything. She didn't even look at me. That was not a good time. I waited. Sometimes kids just need a minute to switch from one environment to another. Sometimes they're tired. Sometimes they're hungry. Sometimes they've decided they hate the concept of pants and are quietly planning a rebellion. Grace walked past me, went straight down the hallway, and shut her bedroom door with a soft click. Not a slam, not dramatic, just final. I stood there for a beat, staring at the door like it might open and provide an explanation. Michael set the bag down and gave me a small shrug, like we were both watching a strange documentary about our own child. She was a little quiet in the car, he said. Probably just tired. Tired kids still ask for snacks. Tired Grace still tells me I'm the meanest mom in America if I suggest bedtime. This was different. I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just the kind of food you make when you're hoping routine will glue the world back together. While the pasta boiled, I knocked softly on her door. Hey, sweetheart, you hungry? A pause. Not really. That was strike 2. Grace believes hunger is an inconvenience that can be solved with crackers and determination. Not really meant something had happened. Okay, I said, keeping my voice light. If you change your mind, I'll leave a plate. Another pause. Okay? I looked over my shoulder at Michael, who was scrolling on his phone like phones had answers. He glanced up, saw my face, and put the phone down. That was rare enough that I almost took a picture. We ate at the kitchen table, just the two of us. The third chair sat empty, which felt wrong in a way I couldn't put my finger on. Every now and then I heard a quiet movement from Grace's room, like she was pacing or opening drawers. Then silence again. After dinner, I washed the dishes with aggressive efficiency. Michael offered to dry. I knew why. He wanted to be helpful, yes, but he also wanted to stay in motion. If he stayed in motion, he didn't have to sit with the thing none of us were naming. I dried my hands, walked down the hallway, and knocked again. Grace, can I come in? A long pause. Then, yeah. I opened the door. She was sitting on her bed, knees pulled up, staring at a spot on the carpet like she was trying to solve a math problem with her eyes. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyelashes looked damp. My heart did that awful little twist. I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd her. Hey, what's going on? She shrugged. Not a sarcastic shrug. A small, helpless shrug. Nothing. I waited. Okay, I said gently. Nothing can still feel big sometimes. She swallowed. Her throat bobbed. I reached out, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Did something happen at Grandma Patricia's? Her eyes flicked toward mine, then away. Not really. That was strike 3. I didn't push. I didn't interrogate. I didn't want her to feel trapped. I just sat there with her in the quiet until she started breathing normally again. "Do you want to read?" I offered. "Or watch something silly?" Grace shook her head. "Do you want me to stay for a minute?" Another pause, then a tiny nod. So I stayed. I sat on my own child's bed and listened to the quiet like it might confess. Eventually, her breathing evened out. I kissed her forehead and told her good night. When I went back into the kitchen, Michael was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, staring into space. "She okay?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said. Michael exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in. "Mom didn't say anything weird. Dad didn't say anything weird. It was normal." Normal can be a disguise. Some families put on normal the way other families put on perfume. I started to tell him that. Then I stopped, because the last thing I wanted was a fight about his parents when my instincts were already screaming. We went to bed. I didn't sleep. At some point after midnight, I heard it. A sound so small it almost didn't register. Tape. That tearing, sticky rip that only happens when someone is wrapping something. I sat up in bed, heart thudding. Michael was asleep beside me, one arm thrown over his face like he was trying to block out the world. The tape sound came again, then paper crinkling. I slid out of bed and padded down the hallway. The house was dim, lit only by the little nightlight in the outlet. Grace's door was cracked open. A thin strip of light spilled into the hallway. I pushed it open and stopped. Grace was on the floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, a roll of tape, and ribbon that looked like it came from a gift bag someone had saved. In front of her was her MacBook. Not the box, the actual laptop. She was wrapping it like it was a birthday present. My stomach dropped so fast I swear my soul lagged behind. "Grace," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Honey, what are you doing?" She froze, tape stuck to her fingers. Her eyes snapped up to mine. For a second, she looked like a deer in headlights. Then her face crumpled. "I'm just," she whispered. I crouched down. "Sweetheart, why are you wrapping your laptop?" Her lips trembled. She blinked hard, like she was trying to hold tears in with sheer force of will. "I'm giving it to Lucas," she said. I stared at her. "You're... what?" "I'm giving it to Lucas," she repeated, voice shaking. "For his birthday." My brain tried to make that make sense and failed. Grace had wanted that MacBook more than she had wanted anything in her entire 9 years of existence. Not because she wanted to play games on it, not because she wanted to show it off. She wanted it because she dreams of making videos. She edits little films like other kids draw pictures. She's been talking about camera angles and sound effects since she could hold an iPad. That laptop wasn't a toy to her. It was her dream, in aluminum and glass. "And you want to give it away?" I asked, carefully, like I was approaching a frightened animal. Grace nodded, tears finally spilling over. "It's unfair." "Unfair?" My voice came out smaller than I expected. "It's unfair that I have it," she said, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "And Lucas doesn't. I don't want to be spoiled. I don't want to be bad." My chest tightened. Kids don't come up with that kind of guilt on their own. Kids don't spontaneously decide they're morally obligated to hand over their favorite thing to keep the universe balanced. That guilt had fingerprints all over it. I sat back on my heels. "Who told you that?" Grace shook her head immediately, like the answer was dangerous. "Grace," I said softly, "I'm not mad at you. I just need to understand." She sniffed, eyes darting to the laptop like it might run away. "Who told you you had to do this?" I asked again. For a few seconds, she just cried quietly, like her body had finally given up on holding it in. Then she whispered, "Grandma Patricia." My blood turned cold. And Grandpa George was there, she added quickly, like she didn't want to leave him out. Like fairness was still important, even now. I swallowed. What did Grandma Patricia say? Grace's voice got smaller. She said it wasn't okay that I have something so fancy. And Lucas doesn't. She said a good granddaughter would share. And... She hesitated, eyes squeezing shut. And what? I asked, my voice so gentle it didn't feel like mine. Grace opened her eyes and looked at me with raw fear. She said if I don't do it, Grace whispered, I can't call her Grandma anymore. I felt something hot and wild rise up in me, the kind of anger that makes your hands shake, the kind of anger that comes from someone making your child cry so they can win something. Behind me, I heard a creak in the hallway, Michael's sleepy voice. Jess? I turned. He was standing there in the doorway, hair sticking up, blinking like he'd woken up in the middle of a bad dream. What's going on? He asked. Grace looked at him, then down, clutching the edge of the wrapping paper like it was a lifeline. I stood there, heart pounding. Michael, I said, my voice tight. Your mother told our child she can't call her Grandma anymore if she doesn't give Lucas her laptop. Michael stared at me like I'd spoken another language. What? Grace nodded miserably. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees in front of her. Grace, he said, voice low. Did Grandma really say that? Grace nodded again. Michael's jaw tightened. He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw something I almost never saw when it came to his parents. Not patience, not diplomacy, not that familiar urge to smooth everything over until no one was mad. Something harder. He stood up. Then, without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I blinked at him. It was after midnight. The house was dark. Our daughter was crying on the floor in a nest of wrapping paper. And my husband, my conflict-avoidant, peacekeeping husband, was unlocking his phone like he was about to do something irresponsible in the best possible way. Michael, I started. He didn't look at me. No, he said quietly. Not angry, just final. Grace watched him like he was about to walk into a storm. I watched him like I was. And 5 minutes later, Michael said something to his parents that changed the rules of our family forever. Something that made their voices go quiet on the other end of the line. Because for the first time since I'd known him, my husband wasn't calling to keep the peace. Before I met Michael, I thought I understood what family problems looked like. In my world, family problems were annoying, not damaging, the kind of stuff you roll your eyes at and move on. Then I met Michael. Michael was calm in a way that felt like relief. He listened. He smoothed things over. He tried to make everyone comfortable, even people who didn't deserve it. At first, I thought that was just who he was. And then I met his parents. Patricia and George were polished, smiling. The kind of couple who could make you feel welcomed while you still somehow felt like you were standing in the wrong spot. Patricia praised Michael constantly, but her compliments came with hooks. You're the responsible one, she'd say, smiling. Not like some people. I never knew who some people were. I just knew Michael would laugh it off. He always laughed it off. The first time I realized I wasn't imagining it was when we started talking seriously about money, the real, unromantic stuff. We were on my couch, sharing popcorn, when Michael mentioned his student loans. I'm still paying them, he said. I frowned. Your parents didn't help at all? He didn't even look up. No. I waited, thinking he'd add something that made it make sense. He didn't. They paid for Kathleen's college, he said instead. Kathleen is your sister, I said. 3 years younger, he confirmed. So, they paid for hers, I said slowly. But not yours. Michael nodded like it was normal. And you're okay with that? He gave me a look like I was the one being unreasonable. Jess, they said she needed it more. That sentence became the rule. She needed it more. Kathleen was sensitive. Kathleen was still figuring herself out. Kathleen would fall apart without support. Michael was capable. Michael would be fine. Michael could handle it. So he did. He worked while he studied. He financed his own degree. He built a career the hard way because no one was going to build it for him. Kathleen kept drifting. New major. New plan. New dream. Eventually, she graduated with something she called passion, and then she married a man who drifted right alongside her. Then they had Lucas, and Lucas became the center of the universe. Patricia and George talked about him like he was the sun, and everyone else was lucky to orbit. His needs were urgent. His disappointments were treated like emergencies. Michael stayed in orbit too. That was the strange part. He stayed polite. He stayed useful. He helped them financially. He helped Kathleen. He helped Lucas. Michael and I both work in IT. We're stable. Not rich, but comfortable. And still, there was always this quiet drain. Money leaving our account like a slow leak. "They need help," Michael would say. "Just this once." "I can handle it." Patricia loved that phrase. She praised him for being such a good son when he gave, and acted wounded when he hesitated. George stayed quiet and let Patricia steer, and the favoritism didn't stop at the adults. Lucas was treated like a prince. Grace was treated like an afterthought. Patricia could list Lucas's hobbies, but she'd forget what Grace liked. George would light up about Lucas's sports, then turn to Michael and ask if he could cover something. Patricia would talk about Lucas having a hard year and how he deserved something special, then hand Grace some generic little gift like she'd grabbed it on the way out of the store. Sometimes Patricia's voice would stay sweet while the meaning turned sharp, like affection was something you earned by behaving correctly. Michael didn't see it, or he didn't want to, and I kept telling myself, it's manageable, it's annoying, it's unfair, but it's manageable. I told myself something else too, without realizing it. Michael can be used, but Grace is safe. Then came Grace's birthday. We kept it simple. Family, cake, balloons. Grace had been talking about video editing for months, seriously. Tutorials, little scripts, plans, opinions about lighting like she was a tiny director. Michael and I saved. We wanted to support her dream, not just buy another toy. So we bought the MacBook. When Grace opened it, she froze like she couldn't believe it was real. Then she made this sound, half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around us like we'd handed her the keys to her future. I was still holding that moment when I looked up. Lucas was watching. His face wasn't excited. It was tight, disappointed, like he'd been promised something and it had been given to someone else. Kathleen's smile went stiff. She didn't wait long. "Wow," she said, too loud. "That's a lot." "It's for Grace's editing," Michael said. Kathleen waved it off. "You gave her something like that in front of everyone," she said, eyes flicking to Lucas. "Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I stared at her. "How it makes you look." "I can't afford that for my son," Kathleen snapped. "So now Lucas feels bad, and I look like a bad mom." Grace's excitement faltered. Just a little. That was what turned my stomach. The way an adult's jealousy could reach a child in seconds. And Patricia and George did nothing. They didn't correct her. They didn't shut it down. They didn't say, "This is Grace's birthday." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. George looked uncomfortable, but stayed quiet. After that, it didn't stop. There were comments, little digs. "Such a princess," someone would say when Grace had the laptop out. "Your mom really spoils you," Patricia would say with a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. Nothing you could call out without someone claiming you were overreacting. But enough that I felt the resentment gathering like a storm. Looking back, that birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was the moment the laptop became a symbol. and some people in that room decided they didn't like what it symbolized. The video call connected faster than I expected. Michael chose video. He didn't say why out loud, but I knew. If you can see someone's face, they can't pretend later that you misunderstood. They can't hide behind tone. They can't rewrite reality as easily. I stayed off camera, standing slightly behind Michael so I could see the screen. Grace sat on her bed, hugging a pillow to her chest, watching with wide, frightened eyes. Patricia and George appeared in front of their computer. The angle was slightly off, the webcam aimed too high. Patricia leaned forward, and then blinked like she'd just remembered what time it was. "Michael?" she said, brightness wobbling for half a second. "Honey, it's late." George squinted at the screen, glasses on, hair rumpled. He lifted a hand in a small wave, slower than usual. They didn't look sleepy exactly. They looked caught, like we'd turned the lights on in a room they thought was private. Michael's voice was controlled, polite, almost too polite. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." Patricia tried to recover. She pasted on a smile that belonged to daytime. "How was Grace? Did she have a good time with us?" My jaw tightened. Michael didn't answer directly. "We need to ask you something." Patricia's eyebrows lifted. "Oh?" Michael took a breath. "Grace was wrapping her laptop tonight. She said she was giving it to Lucas for his birthday." Patricia let out a small chuckle, like this was a sweet misunderstanding. "Well, isn't that generous of her?" Michael didn't smile. "Mom, did you tell her she had to do that?" There it was. Calm. Direct. Patricia's expression didn't change much. She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. "Yes," she said, as if it were obvious. "Of course." Michael's shoulders tensed. Patricia continued, voice firmer now. "Michael, you gave a child a very expensive gift. She's 9. That's not appropriate. And Lucas doesn't have anything like that. It isn't fair." George nodded once, slow, like he was agreeing with a point that had already been decided. Michael's mouth tightened. "It was for her editing. You know that." Patricia waved a hand. "It's still too much. And Lucas wants one. He would appreciate it." Grace made a small sound in her throat, like a suppressed sob. I reached out and squeezed her shoulder. She leaned into my hand. Michael's voice dropped, colder. "Did you tell Grace she can't call you Grandma if she doesn't give it to Lucas?" Patricia's smile returned, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that's used as a weapon. "I told her," Patricia said, "that if she wants to be part of this family, she needs to learn to share." Michael stared at the screen. "That's not what I asked." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "If she wants to be my granddaughter," she said slowly, "she needs to behave like one." Something in Michael's face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The part of him that tried to keep everyone comfortable disappeared. Michael pushed his chair back and stood up. Even on a video call, he stood. Tall. Still. Grace's eyes widened. Mine did too. Patricia blinked again, sharper this time. George sat up straighter. Michael's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "If you want to be Grace's grandparents," he said, "then you need to behave like it." Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then tried. "Michael, it's the middle of the—" "No," Michael cut in, and the word landed like a door locking. "You do not threaten a child's love to get what you want. You do not guilt her into giving up something important to her, and you do not use family as a leash." Patricia's face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. George's mouth opened slightly, then shut. For a beat, it was silent. Not the casual silence of people thinking, the stunned silence of people realizing the rules have changed. Michael looked at the screen, eyes steady. "We're done." And then he clicked the call off. Just like that. No apology, No softening. No, let's talk about this. He ended it. I stared at him. Grace stared at him. Michael stared at his phone like he couldn't quite believe his own thumb had done that. Then he turned to Grace. He knelt down in front of her. His voice softened, but his words didn't. "You are not giving your laptop to Lucas," he said. "Do you understand me?" Grace's eyes filled again. She nodded. Michael took her hands gently. "You don't have to give up something you love to make adults happy. That is not what love is. That is not what family is." Grace's lip trembled. "But Grandma said—" "I don't care what Grandma said," Michael said, and the fact that he said it like that made my stomach flip in the best possible way. "If she wants to be your grandma, she will act like one. Not the other way around." Grace let out a shaky breath like she'd been holding her lungs tight for hours. Michael glanced at me. "We're not going tomorrow," he said quietly. I nodded. I didn't even have to ask what he meant. Lucas's birthday. Michael picked up his phone again and typed a short message. I saw his thumb move. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't negotiate. He just sent it. "We won't be coming tomorrow." Later, after Grace finally fell asleep, Michael sat at his computer. He looked tired. Not just physically. Tired in the way someone looks when they've been holding up a wall by themselves for years and suddenly realize they can put it down. "I've been paying for them for so long," he said quietly. I sat beside him. "I know." Michael swallowed. "I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they just needed help, that Kathleen would get on her feet, that Mom and Dad would, I don't know, appreciate it." He laughed once, dry and humorless. "And then they did this to Grace." He pulled up his bank app. Transfers, auto pays, recurring payments. I watched him scroll like he was reading his own history. Then he started canceling, one by one. He canceled the monthly transfer to Patricia and George, $650 a month, help with bills. He canceled the transfer to Kathleen, $400 a month for groceries and rent help. He canceled the recurring payment for Lucas's activities, $220 a month. He removed his card from the shared phone plan he'd been covering, $180 a month. Total, $1,450 a month. Michael stared at the screen for a long time. Then he closed the laptop and looked at me. "I'm done," he said. "I'm done paying people who hurt my kid." I took his hand and squeezed. "Good," I said softly. "Me too." That night, the house felt strangely quiet. Not tense, just quiet. And as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Tomorrow was Lucas's birthday. We weren't going. The money wasn't going, and Patricia, George, and Kathleen were going to notice. The morning after Lucas's birthday, my phone buzzed like it was having a crisis. I looked at the screen and immediately regretted having eyes. Kathleen had posted one of those long, emotional social media essays, the kind that never mentions the actual thing that happened, but somehow still ends with you being the villain. According to Kathleen, Michael had thrown a tantrum and cut them off right before Lucas's birthday. According to Kathleen, we had dragged adult problems onto a child and ruined Lucas's special day. And then she mentioned Grace. Grace, a 9-year-old. Apparently Grace had refused to help her cousin, and that selfishness had hurt Lucas. I stared at the post, pulse thumping in my ears, thinking, if you have to use a child's name to win an argument, you've already lost. Then I scrolled. Patricia had commented, "We thought we raised him better." George had written something about being abandoned by their own son, which was impressive considering he was typing it from the comfort of the bills Michael had been paying. A few relatives chimed in with sad face emojis and vague sympathy. A couple people asked what actually happened. Kathleen answered with more carefully chosen sadness. Lots of feeling, no facts. Michael stood behind me reading it over my shoulder. He went very still. Then my phone rang. It was a relative who'd been at the party. "Jess," she said quietly, "just so you know, Lucas had a meltdown." I closed my eyes. "About what?" "He wanted Grace's laptop," she said. "He expected it. When it didn't show up, he screamed, cried, demanded they buy him one. It was a lot." I exhaled, slow. "So the birthday wasn't ruined by us," I said. "It was ruined by a kid who didn't get a $1,600 surprise." "Yes," she said. "And Kathleen is leaving that part out." When I hung up, Michael sat down at the kitchen table like his knees had finally decided to stop pretending. Then he said, very quietly, "They're saying I never helped." I turned. "What?" He showed me the screen. Kathleen had written, plain as day, that Michael had never lifted a finger for them, never helped, never supported. That was the part that hit him, not the insults, not the smear, the rewrite. Years of just this once, years of being the responsible one, erased with one sentence. Michael didn't explode. He didn't rant. He just stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. I stayed close, because this was new for him. Standing up to his family wasn't a muscle he'd used before, and it was already shaking. More comments rolled in, some people cheering Kathleen on, some people asking questions, some people clearly enjoying the drama like it was a free subscription. Grace wandered into the kitchen rubbing her eyes, and I flipped my phone over so fast it could have qualified as a magic trick. She didn't need to see adults arguing about her like she was a prize on a game show. Michael watched her walk away. Something settled in his face. He picked up his phone. "I'm replying," he said. I swallowed. "Okay." He typed slowly, not furious, not messy, just finished. He wrote the truth, that Grace had been wrapping her laptop because Patricia and George told her she had to give it to Lucas, that Patricia told her she couldn't call her grandma if she refused, that Grace had been crying, terrified of losing her grandmother's love. Then he wrote the part Kathleen had counted on nobody asking about. The money. He listed the payments, clean and simple. $650 a month to Patricia and George. $400 a month to Kathleen. $220 a month for Lucas's activities. $180 a month for the phone plan. $1,450 a month. For years. And then he added one final line. "I have receipts." He didn't post screenshots. He didn't need to. He just put the sentence there like a locked door. He hit post. For a minute, nothing happened. Then the comment section changed tone. Not instantly, not magically, but noticeably. People asked, "Wait, she threatened a child?" People asked, "She told her she couldn't call her grandma anymore?" People did the math out loud, which is always a bad day for liars. A few relatives messaged Michael privately to apologize. A couple commented publicly that this was wrong, that adults don't weaponize love, and they definitely don't do it to a 9-year-old. Kathleen stopped replying. Patricia and George stopped commenting, and for the first time since midnight, the silence felt less like tension and more like relief. A few weeks later, the doorbell rang. Michael and I exchanged a look, the kind married people develop when they both already know they're about to be annoyed. Michael opened the door. Patricia and George stood on our porch. Kathleen hovered behind them like backup. Patricia held a cake in a clear plastic container with a grocery store label, like it was a peace treaty she'd picked up next to the rotisserie chickens. "Hi," she said, voice sugary. "We brought this for you." Michael stared at the cake, then at his mother. "What do you want?" Patricia's smile wobbled. "We just want to move forward. We understand now. We overreacted." George nodded like he was agreeing with something he hadn't said himself. Patricia took a small step forward. We should go back to how things were. There it was. Michael didn't blink. No! Patricia's eyes narrowed. Michael! You're not here because you're sorry, Michael said, calm as a locked safe. You're here because the money stopped and the sympathy didn't work. Patricia's face tightened. That's not... Michael lifted a hand. If you want contact with Grace, it will be on my terms. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Michael kept going. No money, he said. None. Kathleen's jaw clenched. You will apologize, Michael continued. You will behave. Visits will be supervised. You don't get private access to her. You don't get to guilt her. You don't get to threaten her. And if I hear one more request for money or one more attempt to manipulate my child, you won't see her at all. Patricia stared at him like he was a stranger. George looked stunned. Kathleen's face went red with anger and embarrassment. Patricia's voice sharpened. You've changed. Michael nodded once. Yes, he said. I have. Patricia held the cake out one last time, like sugar could patch the hole where accountability should be. Michael didn't take it. Her hand dropped. They left. Not with a bargain, not with a victory, just gone. When the door shut, Michael exhaled, slow and shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for years. I wrapped my arms around him. He hugged me back, tight. And in that quiet, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Boundaries don't just protect children. They protect the people who were trained to believe they weren't allowed to have any. 6 months later, our life looked completely different. Not because we moved to a new house or won the lottery, because we stopped paying for other adults to live. Without the monthly transfers, without the extra help, without the quiet financial drain, our household felt roomy. We weren't suddenly wealthy, but we weren't constantly calculating. We could breathe. We took Grace on extra little trips, weekend getaways, simple vacations that felt luxurious mostly because we weren't stressed the entire time. We spent more time together as a family, and Grace seemed lighter, like she wasn't carrying that invisible responsibility anymore. Michael was different too. Less tense, less apologetic, more grounded. He learned, in a way that still amazes me, that he didn't have to pay for his place in the family. He didn't have to buy peace. Patricia and George tried a few more times over the months. Little tests, little pushes, little attempts to slide back into the old normal. But every time, Michael held the line. Eventually, they adjusted. Now they see Grace every second week, always supervised, always with Michael and me present. No private talks. No, we'll just take her for ice cream. No whispered guilt in the back seat. And the funny thing is, Grace enjoys them more now. Because she's not afraid of them. Because she knows we're right there. Kathleen and Lucas adjusted too. Without our money, Kathleen had to cancel a lot of extras. Vacations, luxury add-ons, the little expensive upgrades they'd grown used to. They still had enough for basics. Rent, groceries, utilities. What they lost was the cushion, the lifestyle boost, the sponsorship. And watching that happen made one thing very clear. They didn't need Michael to survive. They needed him to maintain a level of comfort they felt entitled to. Our home is happier now. Grace is secure. Michael is free from being the family ATM, and Patricia can't weaponize the word grandma anymore because that word is no longer something Grace has to earn by giving things away. So here's what I want to know. Do you think Michael did the right thing by cutting them off financially? Did he go too far or not far enough? Was supervised contact the right decision, or should we have gone no contact completely? And was I right to support him and stand behind his boundaries no matter what his family said?